This is Kevin Conroy, the voice of Batman. And you're listening to the DCAU Review, hosted by Cal and Liam, streaming at DCAUreview.com and on your favorite podcast app.
Get charged up for action that'll shock your system.
Tell me that's not cool.
An unstoppable superhero and his crew embark on impossible missions and will bring mutated villains to justice.
When Static's in the house, bad guys better step off.
Pull the plug on crime with the adventures of Static Shock. Yeah!
Welcome, everybody, to episode 256 of the DCAU Review. I am one of your hosts, Cal. With me, my good friend, good brother, the man that runs our Twitter account. It's Liam. Liam, we are continuing here in the month of April, if you are listening to this when it originally dropped, with some Static Shock reviews as we stay in the sunny and, in this week's case, windy skies of Dakota. And we are, as we mentioned last week, so if you didn't listen to last week's episode, we had the appearance of a gadget that Static uses in his arsenal, and we posed the question, what are the origins of this gadget, and what did you know? With this week's episode, we learned the secrets of its past and how it came to be. Zapcap past, that is. On this week's episode of Static, welcome to the DCAU Review.
That's right. We got an interesting one to talk about, as mentioned. Yes, some good follow-up. This episode, Winds of Change, is the one where the Zapcap's debut. Worth noting for historians and people who keep record of that sort of thing. But yes, we'll have a lot to talk about with it, and of course that all has to kick off as usual with the official IMDb synopsis for Winds of Change.
Absolutely, and of course, as is the case every week, the IMDb synopsis is brought to you by The Pod Tower. Head over to youtube.com/The Pod Tower today and get our entire catalog, including every single episode of Static that we have reviewed thus far, including the aforementioned episode that we took care of last week. And not only do you get some great content from us, but you get great content from our friends at Watchtower Database and Tin Talk's entire catalog, which includes the entire run of the DCAU, meaning any episode that we cover, they've already covered it. They've been there, done that. So if you want to check out an alternative view of this week's episode, head over to youtube.com/The Pod Tower today and make sure you subscribe and smash that like button.
Absolutely. So this is the synopsis for Winds of Change, which was written by Len Yulee and directed by James Tucker, with music by Stanley Clark and animation by Coco. And that synopsis reads as such. Richie resents Virgil's blossoming friendship with Daisy, and Virgil is annoyed at Richie's constant interference in Static's activities. These resentments strain their friendship. At the same time, Static must battle Slipstream, who controls winds.
Wow.
Not the wind. He controls winds.
Winds.
Plural.
That's right. I think we might be able to chalk that one up to either somebody that was in a hurry, they hurriedly synopsized that episode, or perhaps somebody whose first language was not English. So either way, would not get a passing grade in my book, but perhaps our own synopsis can do the episode a little bit of justice as we open up the episode at the Burger Full restaurant, Liam, and we have a group of children, teens, young adults.
And the rapper Common is there. Look at
They're all hanging out at the table. Yep. And they're having some food, and they start getting bullied by a rather large young adult man named Heavy C, who is attempting to steal their food. They pretty much very quickly disperse of him and cover him in various condiments that they found in said Burgerful restaurant. But just as it seems that this Heavy C has been defeated, it turns out that he is in fact a bang baby. I guess he didn't know that he was a bang baby before this, and this is how he determined that he was. But as the episode title suggests, a rapid wind blows through the Burger Full restaurant, lifting everyone off of their feet. And wouldn't you know, this bang baby, who later on would go on to change his name to something a little bit more appropriate based on his set of powers, which, by the way, learned this week, this set of powers is known as Aerokinesis.
Ooh.
Yes.
Don't say you never learned anything on this show, folks.
That's right. Aerokinesis.
You gonna finish that? I haven't even started, Heavy C. Hey, stop it! You're always doing that. I'm hungry. Buy your own. Hey, that's mine. I'm thirsty too. You're a real pig, you know that? You dissing me? You must be tripping.
Maybe you'd like ketchup with that.
Why you? Your free lunches are over, Heavy C. We're not afraid of you anymore.
Yeah, just a big bag of wind.
Where's that coming from? It's coming from him. He's a bang baby. I am a bang baby. Cool.
So pretty much you gotta imagine that what would happen if Fat Albert from the Cosby the Cosby cartoon show, which feel a little bit dirty talking about now in this 2023, the year of our Lord, but we'll cross that bridge at another time. But yes, imagine that, and then he decided to put on some hockey pads and and like a bathroom rug for a and a Cyclops cosplay visor, and that's going to be our villain this week. But the real main event that we get here is that the aforementioned Zap Caps are developed very early on, and it's interesting because Virgil asks the same exact question that we posed last week, which is: Static creates electricity. At what point would he need electricity grenades? Why would he need them? Well, Richie is very glad that you asked.
What's up? You made it sound like a mad SOS.
Feast your eyes.
Eggs? You brought me here for a picnic?
Open it.
What are they?
Energy containment units. I call them Zap Caps. Go on, charge them up. Now watch and be amazed. Pretty cool, huh?
I can do ball lightning in my sleep. Why do I need those?
Check it. You're in a battle, low on power. You pitch a couple of these at the bad guys and buy yourself time to recharge. Brilliant, eh?
Yeah, brilliant. Look, we better go. Daisy said she'd help debug that new software.
Whoa. Why do we need Daisy? I can debug it myself. Besides, we don't have time.
What do you mean?
We haven't worked on your static moves in a week, and we sure can't do that with her around.
You know, lately it seems like whenever I have something to do on my personal time, you're bugging me about static stuff.
Hey, I got a life too, you know. But at least I'm trying to be responsible.
All right, look. I'll work with Daisy until 5, then I'll get together with you, okay?
Okay. I'll go drop off the Zap Caps at HQ.
HQ? You mean the gas station?
Yeah, the gas station.
Yeah.
It's very quickly established here that Richie is being a little bit of a, I don't know, like a hard ass almost. Like he's all about making sure Static is all the way in on this hero thing and focusing on the hero thing. He wants him to be a full-time hero. He can't, Static can't have a life outside of being a hero. He's got to train his powers. As you recall, this is still very early on. This is season 1, so very early on here. In this, so he's, wants him to practice and hone his skills, and Static's like, get off my back, man. Like I got other stuff that I want to do in my life. I'm not just a full-time hero. So
Mhm.
that, of course, leads to a little bit of conflict, as that other things that Static would like to do include hanging out with Daisy. And there seems to be some sort of just friendly jealousy that occurs there, as Richie recognizes that Static may or may not have a romantic interest in Daisy that is
Mhm.
taking him away from their friendship, and as is quite relatable to many friends at times, where your best friend all of a sudden is dating somebody, and
Mhm.
they don't have time for you anymore. So that's gonna set us up here, and in the background we get a little bit of this Slipstream character just basically wreaking havoc here and there.
Pretty much, yeah. We cut from there to after their initial sort of tiff in the junkyard where he's explaining these zap caps. Virgil agrees that they'll meet up later in the day to go over some training, but right now he has to go work on this project with Daisy. And of course, the meeting time with Richie arrives, and Virgil is still in school in the computer lab working with Daisy. So Richie, of course, shows up and demands an explanation, and Virgil kind of just blows him off and tells him to get lost. And we move from there to Virgil is very frustrated by this, and Richie is very frustrated. We're building to it. This isn't the real breakup yet, but we're getting there.
Mm-hmm.
And so the next little bit passes, and Virgil is laying in his room listening to music, and Sharon comes in to alert him that Richie has called him no less than 6 times in 10 minutes. And Virgil is sort of lamenting about how frustrated he is by how often Richie is hounding him these days. And at that point, the shock vox goes off, and Virgil realizes this is not a training related phone call, but Richie trying to alert him that this new villain, this wind powered villain, is attacking. What else would he attack but an amusement park?
Yes, Richie?
Didn't Sharon give you my message?
Yeah? So?
So, there's a guy making a mess down here at the water park.
I'm a superhero, not a janitor.
Not that kind of mess, bro.
Having superpowers works up one super powerful appetite. Whew, rough weather we're having.
It's that dude. He's got some kind of power over the wind.
I can handle it.
Okay, but be careful. There's a lot of water around here. If you get wet when you're powered up, you could short out.
Richie, please.
It's basically one big setup so that Static can be around water, right?
Mhm.
We have to set up that Static could potentially be drained of his powers should he come into contact with water, which I don't remember ever. I mean, it makes sense, I guess, science-wise. Drained of your powers? I don't know. Maybe electrocuted makes sense, but okay, sure. Richie has that one throwaway line he's got to say.
Yes, absolutely. So we set up this at the Dakota Dunes amusement park. So there's a little bit of superhero action here with Static kind of being overmatched by this new villain, and Richie keeps trying to help and keeps trying to get directly involved, keeping in mind that at this point Richie he's not gear yet. This is as you said, Cal. This is first season. He has no powers or weapons, but he's still trying to get involved. And among all of the kerfluffle, it looks like maybe Static is on the ropes, and so Richie gets this idea that he's going to drive this like animal themed train golf cart.
Shark. It's definitely a shark.
Oh, shark, a shark. Okay, yeah, that's right, because it's a water park.
It's a shark cart.
The shark cart into this roller coaster that Slipstream is standing on, and he does distract Slipstream momentarily, but also causes a big accident, and all of the rubble falls down on Static, and Slipstream goes on his merry way as Virgil now has really had enough.
Yeah, he's very clearly not happy that Richie is not only kind of bossing him around and telling him he's got to focus on this stuff. But he wants him to realize, like, hey, you're not the hero. I'm the hero. I kind of have to make my own decisions on what to do here. So, it's at this point that they really have a rather large blow up where he tells him to kind of buzz off and or stop bugging him, I believe is the term he uses, because Richie responds, well, you don't have to worry about it. I'm out of the bug business forever.
Hey, if it weren't for those inner tubes, I would have been squashed thanks to your screw-up.
My screw-up? Slipstream had you on the ropes, man. I saw an opening and I took it.
Your opening nearly killed me.
Oh, maybe you would have preferred to have Daisy there instead?
At least Daisy doesn't bombard me with a bunch of dumb schedules and training, and look what I build every day.
Whoa, what are you saying?
What am I saying? I'm saying chill out, back off, and quit bugging me.
Oh, okay. Well, in that case, I am out of the bug business forever.
At which point you would hear the voiceover come over and say, he wasn't. But for some time, though, we get that Richie and Virgil really are no longer on speaking terms. We cut to one of their classrooms, and there's a class project that's going on. Virgil selects Daisy, and this further upsets Richie as he looks for someone else, and he sits with Omar, who he tells, well, finally somebody's going to be serious about completing a project loud enough for Virgil to overhear. It's very petty type of back and forth going on here as to hurt feelings between two men, right? Two men in their feelings about
That's
things.
right.
For the rest of the episode. So we see also that Virgil continues to sort of replace Richie's spot with Daisy, including tagging her to various comic book stores and doing the things that normally that Richie would do. They even run into Richie at one of the comic shops, and it seems like things are going to be okay, but then they remember that they're mad at each other, so they both have to pretend like they're disinterested, and Richie ends up walking away. Daisy's a little upset about this. She's a little bit flabbergasted that they're continuing to act this way. But as they're in one of the comic book stores, wouldn't you know it, Slipstream is being tracked by the local news helicopter, which he's not too much of a fan of. So he decides he's going to make the news helicopter crash, chasing after it. And it just so happens that the news helicopter in the same neighborhood, the same area of the comic shop. So it's very convenient that Static can go out and step up just in time to save the day. And everybody's very happy at the end of the day as he uses his electro powers to create a electricity net that he's able to safely help land said helicopter in the middle of the road. Everybody stands and applauds except for Richie, who just sort of nonchalantly plays it off as unimpressed, walking away. But of course, Virgil spots Richie walking away without saying anything or cheering. And this we get a little sad Virgil bit here as he just kind of hangs his head and sighs, realizing that their friendship appears to be doomed for good at this point.
Yeah, I will just say, Slipstream really went from, like, I guess he was just kind of generally a bully when we meet him anyway, and so he's wrecking a water park, but he's also he's trying to steal cash and stuff while he's there. And now he's just like murder. He jumps right to, I'm gonna drop this helicopter out of the sky. I thought that was wonderful. Just a real escalation of events here. But yes, after once again they are unable to or after Virgil is able to save the helicopter, but is sort of let down because he sees that Richie is there and is kind of looking on disapprovingly. Kind of leaves them with neither one of them really feeling that great about things. And at that point, we cut to the next day at school, and we have Daisy confronting Richie this time, and sort of asking, but really demanding that Richie and Virgil work these things out, because she's pretty sick of dealing with both of them when they're not friends, as neither one of them is really acting like themselves. And while they're there talking, Daisy gets a phone call from Virgil, who is canceling their lunch date, and Richie kind of quickly puts two and two together that this must mean that Static is on the hunt for Slipstream once again and races off to try to see what's going on. And at that point, we see that Virgil is he's once again having trouble. This time they're in a park for some. What does Slipstream want?
He's creating. Well, isn't he at like the National History Museum or whatever it is?
Okay.
He's just like, it's hard to say. Is he stealing the artwork or the historical pieces that are in this museum, or is he just creating destruction? I don't think it's readily clear. The guy's just so happy and just large and windy.
He's loving life. I think that's fair to say.
Yep, for sure.
And we'll talk about his costume in a little bit. It's interesting. But yes, from there, Static is once again his water is his kryptonite firmly here as Slipstream drops an entire lake's worth of water on him, and not only does it short out Static's powers, but it also causes like a giant lightning storm within like a 5-mile radius. There's like this giant electric mushroom cloud that goes off. It's so it's like, okay, that's pretty dangerous. Like
yeah, I agree.
That's I feel like it's concerning that our true and our main hero for this entire city, like if he steps in a puddle, he could like short out the power in the entire city.
Yeah, that's a bit of a vulnerability when you think about it.
Yes, and there's actually a trivia note on the wonderful DCAU wiki that apparently I think in some interviews Dwayne McDuffie had mentioned that he was not, in retrospect, was not a huge fan of this as used as sort of a crutch weakness for Static, because probably for the exact reasons we just pointed out. But yes, as it is, Static's out of juice. Richie sees on the news that things are not going well, and so he's rushed back to the gas station, and he grabs the zap caps, and he's going to go try to save the day once again on his electric scooter. Richie, and I was like, it was so funny. He does at least put like the scooter has like a blast shield on it.
Right.
That covers his eyes, because otherwise I'm like, how does no one figure out that this kid that's always hanging around is
Richie
Foley, and then by extension is Static.
Best friends.
Static is
best friends with
right.
Guy
with a guy who has
like Static.
Yes, at the very least has the exact same hairstyle as Static. Maybe, I don't know, but at least he's kind of covering his face here. But yes, he runs in. He tries to throw the zap caps, these electricity grenades, and they all just get blown back at him, and they just all rain down on the ground.
I actually liked this a lot, because you went from making him like, here he comes to save the day, to
yeah, it's a very good bit of like physical or visual comedy here.
Right.
As he races in with like this triumphant, and the music kind of picks up, and you get like this upbeat music, and he comes zipping in, and he's like, all right, and he goes to throw the grenades, and then they just get blown back, and then the wind comes underneath, and the rest of the zap caps go flying, and they start dropping all around him and exploding. It's really quite funny. So at that point, Virgil and Richie are kind of reconvening, trying to run away on foot. And they finally sort of realize that they're better together. We get our lesson for the episode, as they realize that they've both been kind of out of line and unfair to the other, and they need to work together to get out of this. And thankfully, Richie had them, because he extras that weren't in the egg carton that he was carrying them in. And Virgil, as mentioned, realizes that not only can these things generate electricity, but he can absorb the electricity out of them. And so Static powers back up, and he's able to electrify this bridge that Slipstream is standing on, and then sort of tie him all up using various pieces of debris, and then he just kind of chucks him. It's amazing this guy isn't dead. Like,
he throws like a statue, a bunch of garbage cans. Like, this guy's just buried under very heavy things. I know he's a large fella, But yeah, it seems like he would have been crushed because we didn't hear that his bones were like extra dense or anything like that for being a bang baby. He's just immediately buried under thousands of pounds of statue and trees and things.
Well, at least he was wearing those hockey pads and the big metal plate on his chest. I guess those protected him enough as that takes care of our villain. And
there's the moral of your story, kids. Wear your pads when you go out.
That's right. That could save your life. And we get a little postscript back at school as Daisy sees that Virgil and Richie are best pals again, and Daisy is not too interested in going with them to their various comic store hangouts. And then we get something like right out of like the George Reeves Superman show or like the Adam West Batman show, where to end the episode where Daisy says, "Oh wow, you guys are really into this superhero stuff now," and then they like both look at each other and in unison say, "You might say that," and then they do the fist bump and we fade to black.
Hey guys, Richie, what happened to your arm?
Swimming accident. I told you, man. When you dive into the pool, make sure there's water in there. What was I thinking?
Well, I'm glad to see you two back together.
Us too. Which reminds me, you want to come along on another comic book run?
Twice? In 1 week? Thanks anyway.
Too bad. Your loss. No account for some people's taste.
You guys are really into that superhero stuff, aren't you?
You might say that.
Remember, I told you, Richie swearing off that he was out of the bug business forever. He wasn't.
He's a liar. He used to stick to his principles.
He's back. Couldn't stay away. Yeah, but that will wrap up this episode, which, by the way, I did not mention at the top, but originally aired here in the States. Kids WB on December the 16th, 2000, meaning we just passed the 22-year anniversary not too long ago. But for this episode, Liam, I would say, despite maybe it having a similar critique as last week's episode, where we discussed the villain really taking the back seat, not really being the focal point of the episode, this is really a teen drama where we have a couple of teenagers that are in their feelings and that aren't talking to one another over a giant misunderstanding. And because of that creates the majority of the drama. However, because it's our main two characters and the people that we root for to be a team and best friends, and given the context of this being very early on in the series, where we didn't know how long their friendship would necessarily last, I think this is a fun little 22 minutes. The villain is ridiculous. The villain again. I think you could have put anybody in that spot. I think the wind powers are certainly interesting, but the visual of a larger man flying around, shooting tornadoes out of his hands, and also flying on a tornado, because that's how they chose to animate this, as we'll discuss in just a minute, is very goofy. But I think that the base of the tension of the episode is there. I think that it didn't feel like it was dragging at any point. I like that they sort of subverted the expectation of your hero is in trouble. Oh, the guy that invented this invention is going to come in to have to save the hero's butt. But in actuality, he falls on his face and breaks his arm also. So it doesn't subvert your main hero as being the main hero and needing somebody else to slide in there, needing the sidekick to come in and save the day on his own. The invention helps him clearly. Like, they recognize that they work as a team well, and that Richie's inventions are ultimately what helps him, defeat the villain. But it doesn't. Richie's not the hero yet. He's not a hero on the team yet. He's more or less a resource that Static can tap into and rely on. So I like that they didn't go kind of too far outside of the box to make things feel a little bit eye-rollingly predictable with that. So I really did enjoy this one overall. again, we talk about this a lot of times. We'll grade on a curve when it comes to these episodes, and maybe you could chalk that up to it. But I ended up giving Plot a 7 out of 10 for this week.
Nice. Yeah, I'm not too far off. I gave it a 6 out of 10 here. Yeah, I think it's a perfectly fine little episode. I think it's, again, if you look at like sitcom staples, there's always an episode where the best friends fight and they swear they're never going to be friends again. And really everybody else, in this case, Daisy is kind of our POV character for it, but it's like everybody else is made to suffer because you guys won't just say you're sorry and move on. Like,
right.
And so it's kind of, there's some good comedy there, and there's some good, like I said, it's the hurt feelings drama. It's very much, I think, a staple of as you said, like a teen drama here. So and yeah, the villain, I think, is just so wacky and silly that he's a lot of fun, and we'll talk about that more in visuals and voice acting certainly. But he's just this really goofy, very, in the best way possible, cartoony villain. And so I think this episode has a lot going right for it.
Here we go. All right, Liam. Let's move on to our next category, which of course is going to be our animation and visuals. As you mentioned at the top, Coco is responsible for the animation for this week. A familiar name, perhaps. James Tucker was the director for this week's episode. You may have heard of him once or twice on this podcast or so. But what did you enjoy about the visuals this week? I guess let's start with our main villain. Let's talk about Slipstream here. As I mentioned, he's very clearly based off the Fat Albert character from what was that show, The Cosby Kids or whatever it was, or
I thought it was just called Fat Albert, but
Fat Albert, yeah, okay, so clearly based off of Fat Albert, clearly everything about him, the way he's a larger character, his voice is even a sort of a spoof of the Fat Albert character, and I like that they didn't make his costume serious. Like, his costume's goofy. He's a goofy character. His lines are goofy. The voice is goofy. Like, if you had tried to make this guy cool, I think it would have been a little bit more difficult to take it seriously. And I think maybe if he was a bigger part of the episode and seemingly like a more serious threat, it also would have been a little bit harder to take. But I think the look is fine. He's got like, as you mentioned, these hockey pads purple hockey pads that he sports with like this chest plate that's got a tornado in the shape of an S for Slipstream. Like, yeah, good job. He's got the Cyclops visor, like the I guess it's the 80s visor because it kind of goes all the way around his head. And he's got a hat that he wears for some reason, like a blue jean hat. He's also wearing this all over like just his normal clothes. Also, he's got like a white tank top and some blue jeans on.
It's just like whatever he was wearing in that first scene. Like, it's like, yeah, he's got jorts and white t-shirt and a hat.
and then he's got like
the blue trucker hat.
Yeah, and then he's got like I said, it looks like your grandmother's bathtub rug, like the one that lays in front of her bathtub is like what he decided to wear as a cape. And then these purple like knee guards, shin guards, elbow pads, shoulder pads. Very unique.
That's right. It's a lot of fun. Like, all the wind effects, I guess, to match his fit are also purple. So it's a very purple episode. And yeah, I think like you said, he's very silly, but I think that's kind of a lot of the charm of he's constantly kind of like cackling and laughing and taunting, and so there's not but the visuals themselves when he's like tearing the amusement park apart is fun, and all the various things he does with the water when he attacks the helicopter. There's a pretty cool shot of the where they kind of cut from the helicopter to sort of a shot of him sort of flying through the city, and the buildings are kind of sweeping around him. I think that's pretty neat as well. And then, yeah, I think there's the sequence where Static catches the helicopter after that. Like, that whole sequence, I think, is really, really fun. And yeah, I think that's, and we talked about this again, the transitions in and out of that stock static power up animation that we see a lot this week, where he presses down the buttons on the zap caps, and then it transitions into the power up sequence. I thought it was really fun. And then that last sequence where he's kind of using his powers to problem solve and create this weird mishmash of rubble that he traps Slipstream in, so he can't use his powers, is fun too. So yeah, I think there's a lot of fun. I definitely think that it is this just completely outlandish and silly Slipstream outfit that's definitely my visual highlight. It goes to the character design for this week.
He also reminds me, like, the way he moves, as we mentioned, he's kind of got like the Tasmanian devil tornado style, or like, what was the name of the character in the Super Friends? The samurai.
Samurai.
Yeah, it moves the same way. Like he
got like the tornado around his legs. Yeah,
that's right. You can't see his legs; just his bottom half is this animated tornado that moves. So yeah, and he flies that way. Like that's how he flies, also. So very, very interesting choices there. But I thought it was very effective, very fun. I agreed with you. The helicopter pursuit crash rescue was probably the highlight. Prior to maybe the final battle between Slipstream and Static. But yeah, other than that, I thought that compared to the way that the sort of the downbeat scenes we talked about last week, and the animation studio from last week not being, we didn't have favorable things to say about that. We'll just leave it at that. You can check out that in the archives if you'd like to. But this week, Coco, I think did a solid job. I thought everybody kind of looked on model throughout. Everybody moved normally, not a lot of like dynamic, expressive faces that we talked about last week. Everybody seemed to be on model for this first season. So again, I think things were pretty solid across the board. Nothing stood out as like a big goof or a gaffe or, inconsistency or whatever the DCAU wiki wants to call it this week. Nothing stuck out to me. So I ended up going with a pretty strong 7 out of 10 for my score for animation and visuals.
Yeah, I went with the exact same score of 7 out of 10. I think it's a lot of fun, and like I said, I think that whole sequence, as we already talked about a little bit in plot, but yes, once again, that the sequence of Richie zipping in on his little scooter, and like he like rides up the back of a cop car and like jumps over the police line. He's like, all right, time for action, and then he immediately, all the zap caps get dumped out and start exploding around him. I thought that was really, really funny. So very, very, very fun week for visuals.
I will also say that we would be remiss not to mention the comic book that Richie
yes
will share a love for, which is Plant Man by a fictional writer by the name of Denny Miller. So Plant Man, I think pretty obviously it would be a reference to Swamp Thing based on how he looks, everything about the book. Denny Miller, I assume Denny O'Neil and Frank Miller combined into one character.
Referencing the former SNL alum, but no, I think you're probably right. That makes more sense.
Seems like we'd be a little bit more on board there. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if referencing
what a random place it would have been if they just had a reference to what was he even doing at this point? Did he have a show? Was this when he was on Monday Night Football?
I think it was probably sandwiched in between or right around the time he was on Monday Night Football. I think it was he probably would have had an HBO show at that time also. So yeah, it would have been an odd choice for sure. reference. He was a part of American pop culture, but I'm not really related to any comic books that I'm aware of. The Miller verse hadn't quite kicked off yet. No. I don't think. Oh goodness!
All right, well, that's the Dennis Miller minute for this week, folks, and we can move on to music.
Definitely gonna clip that one for a reel. All right, everybody, let's move on to our next category, which is going to be music. And Liam, forgive me, I didn't write it down at the top. You mentioned our music from this week came from
Stanley Clarke.
All right, not too familiar with that name. Are a lot of episodes credited to Mr. Clarke that you can see?
I think he might be. I think he might only be on the season 1, because if you may have noticed, there was no lyrics in the music this week. Sadly,
but responses to that, but
sadly, but But
Yeah.
So I think he did some of the regular music for season 1, and he's he has a lot of other a lot of other music credits to his name. But 14 episodes of Static.
Okay. All right. So he's
around.
We just haven't done a lot of these season 1 episodes in so long, and they're spaced out between months at a time, it feels like. So that makes sense. But I would say, other than our Static theme, the only thing that I noticed was our Slipstream theme. And he has this sort of quirky, it's like hip-hop circus is kind of like what I put. It's like it's like the classic circus organ theme that's just broken up with some like hip-hop beats. It's noticeable. It's kind of like dumpy, quirky also. That kind of fits our character. But it stands out, and I appreciate that it didn't have like some guy doing a Rage Against the Machine impersonation over top of it or something, as we've heard before in the past. But that was the main piece that I felt stood out. I didn't think anything was bad this week. I didn't think anything was terribly offensive, and I kind of dug that music. So grading on a curve here, but I ended up giving a 6 out of 10 for music this week.
Yep, I gave it the exact same score. Yeah, I didn't have many additional notes besides the Slipstream theme and of course our season 1 Static theme. But I think it's solid. It plays more of a background role. You get it brought in a little bit more prominently for our action sequences with Slipstream, and then there's a lot of point where there isn't a lot of, when it's just because this episode focuses a bit more on the teen drama high school stuff. We don't get as much music in those scenes. So yeah, it's a light week for music, but still a couple of highlights.
And when Richie shows up on his little on his little scooter, also there's some music as he comes trying in to save the day and falling flat on his face. There is some music, comedic, played for comedic timing, as you mentioned, with the sudden dropout. All right, Liam, let's wrap things up this week with our voice cast. Not a ton of people to talk about, but as we mentioned, there's actually a couple of names that you may not recognize, mainly with our main antagonist, but has definitely popped up quite a bit in the DCAU or in DC Animation even. So let's go through and talk about this week's voice cast.
That's right. So we do briefly have Michelle Morgan as Sharon. Not much to her this week, but as well as a brief appearance by Maria Canales-Barrera as Shelley Sandoval, the reporter who gets attacked by Slipstream.
They have one reporter in Dakota.
That's it. It's just that one.
She's the lead anchor. She's out on the beat. She's in the helicopter. She's everywhere.
Yeah, you gotta wonder, you imagine Edwin Alva owns this station, right? Because who else has money in this town?
Correct. And he plays the role of the rich person manipulating the local media, of course.
Right. So he can't spring for one additional reporter? Unbelievable.
Well, if it plays anything like real life, he's also insanely cheap.
That's art imitating life in that case. But
Indeed.
Yes. Elsewhere, of course, we have Crystal Scales as Daisy. Is really good in this episode. She gets this is probably the most, other than maybe her introduction episode where Virgil meets her at the smart kid school. This is probably the most we've gotten to see her do, at least in these earlier episodes. And she's like I said, she gets to be pretty funny because first is sort of her just reacting to learning that Virgil and Richie are on the rocks, and then her sort of just slowly getting a little bit more fed up with it as they're going to the various comic stores, and she's like, wow, so you do this every week? And then when Virgil and Richie kind of have their standoff in the comic store where neither one of them is going to buy this issue that they're both clearly dying to read and talk about to each other, she just grabs it, shoves it at him, and she's like, oh, just buy it. The way that she just sort of gets more and more exasperated as the episode goes, culminating in that scene where she just starts yelling at Richie to figure out what's going on back at the lockers. I think she's really good this week.
Yeah, that scene where she tells him to get out of his feelings and start being friends again. I really enjoyed that. She does have a solid performance. I can't remember if we were hypercritical of her in that first episode or not, but if we were, then this I think more than makes up for it. She's given a lot to do this week, and some of her reactions and playing off of Virgil and kind of fitting into this role as or attempting to fit into the Richie role when Richie is gone, and kind of being dragged along to these different comic spots, and then kind of putting her foot down at the very end and just being like, I'm good. I don't need to go any more comic book stores twice in the same week. So yeah, she's really solid.
Absolutely. And then elsewhere in our cast here, we'll get to our main actors in a moment. But yes, Cal, as you mentioned, we have Bumper Robinson playing our villain of the week, Slipstream. And as you mentioned, has done quite a few across Static Shock as well as Batman Beyond as well, most famously for Static. He played the villain Destruct in one of the very early episodes, because Virgil's classmate kind of can't control his transformation. I think that's actually the first Ebon episode too. That one they introduced the meta breed there, but and also played Terry's friend in the episode Payback. So it's he's a veteran of these episodes. Also does a lot of other DC animation voices like Cyborg in the Justice League Doom movie, as well as did voices on Batman the Brave and the Bold and Ben 10, Teen Titans. So a regular veteran of the voice acting. And as we've sort of talked about, he's just doing fat over it.
Right. Yeah. He's not.
And it's funny. Like he's very, like I said, it's very silly. He's not a giant portion of the episode. If he was like really trying, because they open with it and you're almost thinking like, oh, he can't be doing this voice if this is going to be like some like tortured, bullied like story where he's seeking revenge on the him or whatever. But no, he's just a wacky cartoon villain that shows up every 5 minutes to complicate things for our heroes. So, but he's a lot of fun in this episode.
Yeah, he's very goofy. I will say it was hard to tell what he was saying. I don't know if it was the mix of the audio or whatever it was, but maybe I'm just deaf. But some of the lines, it was difficult to understand what he was trying to say, or what the lines were for me. So it kind of actually added to the comedy a little bit. It's like you can't even understand what this guy's saying. It's so funny. Solid effort there from him. I can't say that it's his best work, because I feel like we've seen other roles that he's played that were a little bit stronger and maybe a little bit more serious. But what can you say? It's he plays a goofy villain really well.
Absolutely. And then that just leaves us with our two leads of the episode. We have Jason Marsden, of course, as Richie, and the great Phil Lamar as Static. And not surprisingly, they're a lot of fun. Like, and this is maybe more of a plot note. They're immediately irritated with each other. Like when we were introduced to them in this episode, which again, as you said, might come from more of us just dropping back into season one after being away for a while. But it struck me, and part of that's the framing device for the episode. But like, wow, they're mean to each other. In the first half of this episode, they're so mean to each other, but it is kind of entertaining, like we said, especially once they do have the big blow up and they're trying to sort of ignore each other and sort of rolling their eyes at each other and trying very hard to not be friends. I think it's pretty entertaining.
Yeah, they play off each other, and it's interesting because I even was just kind of listening, and some of the dialogue that they had written for them wasn't the best, especially some of the back and forth, like when he's trying to explain the zap caps, or when he's trying to explain that Static needs to go out and train. Like it's like this dialogue was not written well, but the way that their performance is, specifically Mr. Marsden playing off of Mr. Lamar, just tremendous. Like they're able to kind of take those lines where somebody else might just read them without any inflection, any emotion, whatever it is. They played off each other really, really well. I love how he kind of, Mr. Marsden specifically, later on has to sort of play disinterested when Static saves the day. I thought that was, he's hurt, but he's also like, well, I got to be too cool for school for this. So, it's a unsurprisingly a solid performance from both of our leads this week, and they have great chemistry, which works out really well for the entire series.
Absolutely, yeah. I don't think it's like their best episode, but they do get a lot to do, and like I said, it's a classic trope to have the best pals break up for an episode and then get back together to solve the problem at the end of the day. And Mr. Marsden and Mr. Lamar do a very good job of their performances, and I think overall between them and Miss Scales as Daisy, I think this was will be my highest rated score for any of our 4 categories this week. I ended up giving voice acting an 8 out of 10 this week.
Wow, yeah, that's pretty strong. I went just 1 point lower with a 7 out of 10. Yeah, I think everybody turned in a pretty solid performance this week, and I love that. Again, even though maybe the animation isn't the style that we love, it's why we break these things down into 4 different categories, right?
Mm-hmm.
We don't judge it we do judge it as a complete product, but we also look at the individual parts that make up this entire cartoon. So this week, clearly, we really enjoyed the voice acting and found some great performances from our voice actors and actresses.
Absolutely, yeah. There's always, as we say often, there's always something to find, even in the episodes we don't love as much, or some of these series or portions of the series, seasons of the series that we're not as crazy about. There's always something we can find to enjoy, and I think this one is gonna probably end up being, if I had to guess, I didn't compare, but I would guess this ends up being one of the higher ranked season 1 Static episodes when all is said and done.
Yeah, maybe we can go back and review and come back with a report card next week for the episode as we follow up with that, or on our social medias this week, perhaps. But I guess at that point it will be time to total things up here at the end. And totaling all of my scores up, Liam, I come up with I think for season 1 Static, pretty strong, 27 out of 40. What about you?
And I ended up, even though I don't think we necessarily agreed in too many specific categories,
only in two.
Yes, we still ended up with the exact same score this week, as I also had a final score of 27 out of 40.
All right, so now we answer the question: do Zap Caps, the secrets of their past and how they came to be, are they worth saying that this is a necessity to rewatchability? I think based on the fact that we were so curious, or I was so curious last week with watching that episode, saying, where did these come from? Why do these things exist? I think I got to go with, this is pretty pivotal to the series. I don't know how many more times in the series he uses Zap Caps, but I'd say if you're watching this thing through, you're gonna want to know why the Zap Caps exist, and it's a pretty fun episode all the way around. So I'll give it a 1 thumb up for rewatchability.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think I would give it a 1 thumb up. It's a fun enough episode, and as mentioned, if you skip it and then you get to another episode later, and you're like, what are these? What are these weird little grenades he has? We will have the answer.
There you go. All right, Liam. Well, that will begin to wrap us up for this week. So thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Don't forget, we would love your support for the podcast. If you are listening, that is, of course, one major way of doing so. But there's a couple other different ways that you can do so as well. If you're listening to us on a podcast app like Apple Podcasts or Spotify that lets you leave a 5-star review, we would greatly appreciate if you did that. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts and there's a spot for you to actually leave a little paragraph telling people what you enjoy about the podcast, podcast. Not only does that help us, because then it lets us know what you enjoy about the podcast, because we do read them, but it also helps us with the algorithm also, because it lets people, or the almighty algorithm, know that you are listening. It may then push it into somebody else's algorithm stream, and then they might listen to it. And it's all about multiplication here in the podcast. We love talking with people, getting more people that like these cartoons listening to us talk. So you can do that. You can help us out. Don't forget, if you're listening to us on Spotify, also, while you're leaving that 5-star review, interact with us within the show notes, where you can get our Spotify exclusive poll of the week and our question of the week to interact with us. We have people that do that every single week. It's awesome. I love seeing the results to some of these wacky, goofy polls. Usually the polls are comedic. Sometimes they're serious, but a lot of times they're comedic. And then the question of the week, it's always fun to read people's answers. We'll usually post the answers that show up eventually and tag them to our episodes. So we do read them. We appreciate your feedback and engagement with that. If you want to support us additional ways, you can check out the show notes of the podcast. There are 2 different ways to support us monetarily. There's a direct link if you want to buy Liam and I a coffee to have every single month. We have a couple people that do that, and we are incredibly blown away by their generosity every single month. We appreciate you if you support us monetarily. And if you're interested in doing that, check out the show notes. If you want to get something for your dollar, there is a link to our shop also, where you can get a witty mug, a goofy shirt, a funny hat, whatever you want to wear. There's some merchandise you can grab. That link is also in the show notes. And of course, as we mentioned at the top of the program, check out youtube.com/thepodtower, subscribe to that channel and like our videos, and check out the other podcast that is on there. Jump on the Bat-Wagon. James and his friend do that podcast weekly. They are currently in Batman the Animated Series. They're a little bit ahead of us in their Batman the Animated Series run, but they've done a bunch of great reviews. It's a pretty interesting concept. So if you haven't checked that out, do so today. Liam, we are wrapping things up. Actually, I guess technically not wrapping things up, because we'll have 2 more Saturdays, but next Saturday will be our final edition here in Dakota for the month, as our 5th Saturday is usually an Elseworlds month. We'll talk about that next week. But as far as the episode we'll be reviewing, we are now completely finished with season 1 of the Static Shock series. So where are we headed for our final edition for the month of April?
That's right. And I think we got another fun one to talk about next week. We'll be moving back into season 2. And we will be covering an interesting episode called Pop's Girlfriend. So, as always, when you do another I think sitcom staple is when one of the parents has died off screen before the series started. You always got to do the episode where mom or dad gets a new boyfriend or girlfriend. So we've got that coming up next week with the episode Pop's Girlfriend. Very excited to delve into that one.
I wonder if she might be the main antagonist of the episode. Only time will tell. Can't wait to cover that with you. But until then, I'm Cal.
And I'm Liam.
And we will talk to you on the next episode of the DCAU Review.
Bye-bye.